Hey, good morning, nobodies. Welcome to the Nobody Podcast. I'm Nobody, John Kellogg here. Beautiful morning in sunny Southern California. Got a good one for you today, guys. I feel like like I'm well on my way to being one of those old curmudgeons that's just annoyed by everything that the whippersnappers do these days. Oh, I think that's the path I'm headed down. Like, I'm gonna be that badass 80-year-old that you just like has these old sort of seemingly grumpy confrontational opinions that you're not quite sure if he's just an angry person or just like wise. You know what I mean? That's I feel like I'm headed down. We people like they don't quite get you because at least that's what I want to be at 80. I want to be wise. I'm halfway there age wise, so I don't know about wisdom wise. So that might be a problem. I might be a little short on the wisdom field, but hey, man, hopefully it'll be a good time. They keep getting these dick pills going. I'll be good at 80. If I can still rock it at 80, that's all I'm asking for. I'm a simple man of simple pleasures. Give me a nice cigar, some weed to smoke, coffee to drink, sunny Southern California. That's all I need. I'm good. But for those of you not, man, I hope it's beautiful where you guys are in your time and place, because this is all relative. I'm recording this in early February, the 7th to be exact. And you might be listening to this God knows when. So, isn't that weird? That whole time and space thing. Woo! You guys can tell what I've been doing today. But anyway, the stock market's been going a little crazy. This is John here at the Stock Market Hotline. Just letting you guys know we're going to talk stock market thing for a little bit here. It's going crazy, but I keep hearing this, right? It's up and down, up and down. Is it a dead cat bounce? Is this the beginning of a crash, right? What is this? But let me tell you what this really is. When you hear the news and investors when they say people are, quote, switching to value, what that really means is they're using a method and metrics to evaluate companies. Companies aren't necessarily value or growth. See, value, when you consider value or value stocks, utilities, oil, let's see what else would be a value stock. Car makers. Their value, what that really means is those types of companies, which the best and far most accurate way to evaluate them is by a value model, not a growth model. It's simply because those are old pre-internet companies. That business model predates the internet and is a necessity. Those companies use the internet to conduct business and be more efficient. They don't require it. Growth companies are exactly the opposite. They require the internet and they need it to conduct business. So it's not exactly the opposite. It's similar, but they require it entirely. And so when you hear growth valuation, growth didn't become a thing until the internet because it was a new industry. Tech was a new sector. And there were ways to make money in tech that you could not make in the pre-tech business, right? Oil just can't create data to sell and make money. They have to extract and refine oil. That's their business model. So when you hear this, keep in mind that when things there are some things, like I mentioned, those oil stocks, the car makers, auto, that are value, that you call those value stocks because it is by far the best and only applicable way that you can evaluate it, and that's using the Bingram model essentially and all that foundation built there. The issue that I have one thing people need to be aware is that when we switch to value, a value measure, I feel like it's a slightly more accurate. You can be more precise with a value style because there's less speculation. In growth, you're taking the growth model, whatever their growth rate, and their earnings per share. And you're essentially multiplying it to sort of get an idea, and you're including the outstanding shares to get an idea of what it's worth at this rate. And then you have to sort of tack on an extra whatever percentage, and that's where the speculation comes in, is when you have to tack on that extra percentage to determine what a good price to buy in the future, because you have to price in the future earnings, like next quarter. So if they grow at, let's say, 20% a quarter, which is pretty good, but let's just say that they're growing at, and that's 20%, yeah, 20% a quarter. You have to add 20% now and sort of buy it in the future, because the market is sort of, everyone is factoring that in, and so it's driving the price up. When you switch to value, they're not doing that. When you begin to measure a stock with a value, with the metrics, the value metrics, the Graham model, that pricing in future earnings based on growth is sort of not added in there. Now, I'm not saying it's more accurate, because it's not. You need something that can, the best model is to have something that includes these three things. You need to have value. You need to have something that understands the growth of a business, and something that that measures its momentum, because momentum is the thing that we saw with the meme stocks last year. So the thing when you talk about value and growth is that I think where the issue you're going to have, and it's going to be interesting to watch the market this time around with those companies that are in a little bit of both industries. Companies like Lemonade, LMND, which is an insurance company and a tech company. It's both. Square. Well, I don't know what they're called now. I should pay more attention to them, but I know them as Square, ticker SQ. They're sort of a bank, lender, they call fintech, right? And that's going to be interesting to see fintech, because fintech hasn't been through these up and down, internet growth cycles and stuff yet. And same thing with Palantir, which is interesting because it's like a defense contractor, like Raytheon and Lockheed, which you can generally use value metrics to get a very good, accurate per share cost of what this should be, whether you're buying low or high, or getting value or not. And so, but they're sort of a tech company. Other ones like Nintendo, which has like a lot of growth metrics to it. That's the size of which and scope of which it is growing. Its international exposure. It's both like in retail, but in that video game retail era where they also have these intellectual properties like Mario, Zelda, I think Pokemon to some extent. But sort of these old school games that the now parents of my era, where they're starting to release these intellectual properties into sort of like a Disney, like theme parks. I think it's like Universal or something, or I don't remember what the deal is with, but my point being is that they're sort of in this gray space between tech, entertainment, and video games. Amazon is sort of, they're also, I mean, probably the bigger part, I wouldn't say the bigger, but probably the better growing side of their business is in the like web hosting tech side, and they're also a retail company. So it'd be interesting to see how valuation, when these companies, these sort of gray area companies, which have the speculation from the growth tech model, how much air of it comes out as far as the price, because they're sort of a hybrid. They're sort of in the middle here. And just to be clear, there's tons of companies like this. These are just the ones at the top of my head that I can just sort of rattle off that are sort of in this in-between space. And so when I mentioned earlier, you need to do all three, because I think that's the key reason why I've been every year for the last almost 10 years now. I've been over 25% year over year. And that's including, but you got to understand, I have been investing during this historic all-time bubble run, right? So that's not saying anything really. I don't think it's impressive at all. It's just sort of I think it's the conditions of the market that my returns have been inflated because of this historic run. But I do think the reason why I am perform better than most of my peers is the first reason is discipline. You have to be disciplined. Don't react to news. The news is there to make you react and to make you do something. And if they want you to sell, that's because they have a buyer lined up. If all these Morningstar and Yahoo News and Google Finance are all sitting there saying sell, 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 that's because they got fuckers on the other side waiting to buy, buy, buy. And so I don't trust the news. I stay disciplined and have faith in my approach. And even if things don't work out as when I assume the timing should, I have learned, I wasn't always this way, but I have learned to just chill the hell out, forget about it, and let time work to your advantage, because it almost always does. Not all the time, but almost always it does. But to me, the biggest thing is you need a thing that where you need to understand if you're buying something at or near value, simply because you need to know if you're buying it at the top or, where you're kind of buying it. Is it in the middle? Is it at the bottom? Is it at the top? And so you need something like value measures to tell you what you're actually getting for the price you're paying. And then you need something like a growth measure to sort of measure what the company's economic performance is. Don't read the reports yet. Just look at their numbers. Calculate the ratios, their cash to debt, equity to debt, like their average income from the net income to debt. You kind of want to know how much do they have versus how much liability, what's their money versus their liabilities. And then you got to add something that kind of focuses on how to use the momentum, because there is something to momentum, something to the increase in the volume average or the volume versus the average. There is something to, I like to use the 30-day and the difference in the percentage difference in the 30 and 50-day moving averages, simply because the first 30 days is going to be identical in those. The difference where you're going to see, it's like the control group I see it as. The difference is in those last 20 days that the 50-day is averaging. If those last 20 days are higher than these current 30 days, which would cause that difference to go down, then you could see that there's some price momentum on that. And that will tell you, that'll give you an idea. A regular price momentum within 2 or 3% is probably nothing that you should ever bat your eye at. Anything above 5 or below 5, above 5%, either to the upside or downside, you might want to start paying a little attention to. But so I use something like that kind of looks at the difference on the average volume versus the moving average, just to try to determine what is a good what's a good way to measure or to try to get an idea of what the momentum is. The thing is so if we are going into a bear market and we are going to value, then I think we still have a long way to go before a crash. This is February 2022 for those listening. We just saw a 25% pullback in Facebook, and I don't even think that's actually anything of significance. I think this is just a switching back to value, not anything at all related to a crash. I think this is where value turns around and says, oh, hey, you know what? Facebook has got solid numbers there. This is where they're performing at. I have Facebook around 230, and my metrics, it's actually probably a little undervalued at that, but not much. My point being is, it's probably closer to 235. Anyway, my point being is this 25% drop in Facebook may not be any indication of the company at all. They said, oh, they had weak earnings, and so, that's why it dipped so much. And it may be that may be it. That very well could likely be the explanation. And it's simply coincidence that it's now fairly priced from a value perspective. And I mean at value, I mean you're getting what you're paying for. You're not going to make too much more than what that, according to the numbers. So this could be either a coincidence that the growth model company just happened to dip to where it's considered fairly value, or people are actually switching to value, and the value model has taken 25% of the air out of that speculative growth bubble, because that metric, right, has some inherent speculation in there. So if anything, at the very, very worst, the Facebook pullback, it might be a hint, like a drop of blood in the water. Some of the sharks are going to smell it, but they're not all getting there yet. That's what I think it is. Because you got to think about it. We still have the Fed rate raise to go, because they're supposedly going to raise this in March by probably a quarter point. You don't have the bond yield curve inversion yet. Housing is still up and not crashed. It hasn't like unwound or anything. We still have hyperinflation. But what I mean to go is we still have more hyperinflation. And I would like it to not be that way, but I'm just working on the assumption that the Fed, upon the pullback, when they raise rates and then they start increasing taxes everywhere, and you don't have the performance that they thought because Washington is still spending money at a ridiculous rate, that they're going to go back to QE or some type of QE, like they're going to go to universal basic income or some form of money injection, cash injection that's going to hyperinflate the market. Or not the market, excuse me. It's hyperinflate our economy, our value, and devalue the dollar big time. So I think the best case scenario for all this is all these events are spread out enough to where each individual action, the Fed raise rate, yield curve inversion, housing crash, etc., so forth, tax increases, that they are spread out enough to where the markets are getting hammered between 25 and 50% at each of these, but there's enough time in between for it to recover. It seems that markets only take about 30 days to sort of reinflate, at least under the current process, right? So let's say they raise rates and maybe it takes 2 months now. That's actually not long at all. So if you have enough of these events where they're spread out over time, we would sort of avoid that doomsday scenario where it all happens at once and everyone is in trouble, or a lot of people are in trouble. There's still going to be a lot of people in trouble, because I can't imagine that if American families don't have $1,000 saved, that they're going to be able to withstand each of these consistent big jolts to their hit, right? Like hyperinflation, raising taxes, the housing market going down, right? Whatever money they may have had in their house is gone, or because of hyperinflation, rent is going up. So to me, it's, I could see a problem where in either scenario, best or worst case, where most people in this country, like 50%, are going to be like in bad shape. Like even me, I'm okay, but the rate at which hyperinflation, the rate at which it's inflating, price inflation, not economy inflation, that's horseshit the way they measure it. Price inflation is starting to make me a little bit like, ooh man, what moat I had is going to be filled up pretty damn quickly at this rate. So, worst case scenario, unfortunately, is this all happens again like it did before, because history rhymes. May not repeat, but it certainly rhymes. The Feds are going to raise the rate. It's going to cause, right, a yield curve inversion, because, I mean, when you fuck with the money supply, right, what happens? The money supply, things happen to it. Housing, right, that causes like these dominoes to hit. Housing crashes. Everyone's pulling their money out and protecting their money because that's what they need now. Housing crashes, all the, while the government, our representatives, quote representatives, are raising taxes and going back to some sort of QE and of course continue to hyperinflate the dollar. just so they can keep this sort of stock market economy false narrative facade going for another 10 years, so these people in Washington can continue to insider trade and continue to make 35% better than the people at Wall Street, guys that do this for a living. Somehow, man, these fucking student Pelosi's, they are hell of an investor, especially right after these briefings and meetings, So, but anyway, that's what I think happens. Let me know in the comments what you think happens, or if you think I'm crazy, or if you think I'm doomsday scaring. But essentially what I'm just saying is that I think history is going to rhyme again, and we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing, because I haven't seen anything to indicate otherwise. And sadly, that means that China is going to be kicking the fucking shit out of us in the next 25 years. Like, I don't say that happily, but before 2050, it's going to be bad. And thankfully, I have no problem investing in China. I have been invested in China prior to their stock market crash, and I absolutely plan to do it again, because at least they have enough fucking sense to buy and hold gold reserves, to not fuck with Russia, to instead make oil deals with Russia, that they at least, even though that they are probably as bad or worse than us on the human rights, well, certainly worse than us, but I mean, it's not like it's by much, that at least they have enough fucking sense to stick with the fundamentals. We do not. What blows my mind about us is that Russia is not a big country, right? As far as grade goes, let's call them a B country. If America went with Russia and said, hey, look, let's team up, let's be cool, we're done with this anti-whatever rhetoric, our bad on our end of the fence, let's work together as far as in the oil, gas industry, right? And let's fuck these motherfuckers up. An alliance with Russia would be so good for us, especially considering how close we are with Canada. You would have maybe not so much on the petroleum oil market, but on the timber side, you would have a fucking foothold on the market. Russia is a mineral oil resource-rich country with horrible corruption, right? Like Mexico, like America, like Canada, right? So it's not like we're not unlike them. We are very similar to them, which is probably why the Democrats want to pick a fight with them now, right? Which is crazy, because in the 1950s, during all this McCarthyite Russia scare shit, it was the Republicans. And here we are 75 years later or something, or 60 years later, I don't know, whatever. Now it's the Democrats doing this shit with the Republic of Russia. So it's not quite the same Soviets, but it's crazy. Which segues perfectly into my next point. We have lost our fucking minds. America has lost its mind. There was a time when it used to be okay to ask questions. But since COVID, if you do so now, you are a pariah. Or pariah. Oh my God, I fucked that up. But you are a pariah. For sure. You can't. Joe Rogan is right now in the middle of, quote, controversy and trouble again. Because he put people with differing opinions up on his podcast. I'm a Joe Roganite. So I'm going to defend him because I think he's worth defending. He's one of the few true beacons left. And what the fuck, people? I mean, are we going to destroy our last hopes of where you can actually have honest, long form, however long a conversation is, and it's seemingly unedited? It definitely seems that the point of it is to be authentic. Who knows if it is edited or not? The point is that where else are you going to get something even remotely like that? And here's the caveat: without having to go on the internet. You can't do that in any other, there's no other format except online, which you have to now sift through all of the minutia from the corporate internet, which, let's be honest, corporations run the internet. So once you sift through all the shit of their corporate podcast, quote, independent news, you have to find the authentic people like Breaking Points, Crystal and Sagar, like Russell Brand, like Jimmy Dore, like Joe Rogan, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of other guys out there and women out there who are authentic. Like, I know there's this, there's the Brilliant Idiots. I love Charlemagne Andrew Schultz. That's a great one. And then with Matt Taibbi and the other woman, I can't remember her name. It's like Sunday Morning. I don't remember. I should know. It's a great podcast. Rational National. Every now and then he has something that annoys me, but, that's just the nature of some of the progressive stuff. Just some of that progressive stuff at its heart just annoys me. It bugs me. But so these are great independent, or I would say independent or honest, where you're going to find truth. So what are we going to do? We're just going to kick out anyone who is going to seek out another source of information, right? Because CNN never lies. The United States government, when have they ever been in trouble for lying? I don't think there was any issues with Iraq and dishonest information. Right? And if you apply, I heard this the other day. It's a great point. If you applied the modern day censorship, tech censorship, misinformation guidelines to the 2000 Iraq war, weapons of mass destruction, if you would have had said that there was a conspiracy to lie to the American people in order to get us to go into Iraq, that would have been misinformation and you would have been deplatformed. If you would have said it was a conspiracy that a drone strike killed a family in Afghanistan, then you would be deplatformed. But these are things that have actually happened and have actual, they were actually true. And there's so many of these, quote, conspiracies that end up being true now that I think you can't even call people. I heard this great point on Russell Brand's podcast. You can't even call people conspiracy theorists now. You have to call them conspiracy analysts, because some of the craziest ones are true, and some of the most outlandish ones are actually true, and then some of the more mild ones where you're like, well, I don't know, are fake. And so it's troubling that now you get in trouble for exercising your constitutional rights. Now, if you have free speech and you talk about something other than the approved corporate government oligarch narrative, canceled. Free speech, canceled. Right? If you exercise your right to bear arms, you're a racist or a fascist. If you're against search and seizures, you're a fascist. You're for trial by jury, the use of the Fifth Amendment and self-incrimination. Excess, against excess punishment, excessive and undue punishment. I can't remember exactly the wording in the Seventh Amendment. I think that's it, or the Eighth Amendment is the punishment one. Anyway, right? None of this crazy. Oh, no, you're part of the patriarchy. If you believe that not all powers that are enumerated in this Constitution should be deferred and reserved for the states, for them to decide and them to decide alone, nope. If you believe in exercising that right, it's white privilege, right? It's this crazy war. It's not even a war. It's this crazy inversion of our fundamental American constitutional values, where if you do exercise the rights, that the people who fought the people made sure that these were separated and highlighted. It wasn't like these just weren't included in the Constitution to begin with. They insisted, as in the states, when it went to ratification, it went through the, quote, Continental Congress back then, I think is what it was, and then went to the states, and they the people and the states were adamant that we pulled out these 10, like as if it was the 10 commandments of America, these 10 specific powers to be included in this, but highlighted also separately within it, as if it is his own entity. That's how important these things were. And now, if you exercise them, it's either white privilege, fascism, racism. List your fucking victimhood. That's the ism that it is. And that's what makes me no fucking curmudgeon. Is I look at this thing and, and then we say this ridiculous shit. Like, one side says the elections were stolen in the 2 elections before, but in this elections they were fair. But then the other team claims that these last elections were stolen, but the ones before that were fair. The only consistency I can see is that all of our elections are fraudulent in some way. This is why I don't vote. This is why I encourage people not to vote or to deregister. You can actually register to not vote, as long as you're over 35 and no longer eligible for the draft, because it has to do with war, right? Why would voting and your ability to be enlisted in war, why would those two be separate, right? In America, we need our war and our voting, right? Those two go hand in hand somehow. So once you're no longer draft eligible, you can unregister to vote. I highly recommend it. You don't get any of that shit in the mail. No one bugs you. You don't get on these call lists anymore. When people go up to you at the grocery store and say, "Oh, hey man, you registered to vote?" Nope. And you're not lying to nobody. It's great. You don't have to participate and legitimize this bullshit system. Instead, you can put your efforts into creating one elsewhere. Like, let's work on blockchain voting. Why can't we vote on the blockchain? Let's get rid of these legislators. Let's take a piece of technology, the blockchain, and let's put our voting on it. So that way there's no more fraudulent elections. That way the left can't say, this was fair, but this one wasn't. And the right can't say, that one wasn't fair, but this one was. No more of this bullshit. How about we just stop having fraudulent elections, because they all are fraudulent, according to the people in charge, right? Just depends on what fucking color tie you wear. That's what matters, is what color tie you wear, if the election was stolen or not. We also have now these blue and purple-haired Karens running around screaming at me for not being woke enough. Right? My bad. I didn't know people of color was okay, but colored people isn't. My bad. So, because that horrible term, colored people, and people of color is okay, so then is it okay to say N-words? Or is it okay to say people of the N-words? Like, how ridiculous does it get here? So, I got those people, and then I got these other Christians claiming that they have all the answers. They have all the answers in their book from their sun god that they worship on Sundays. Yes, Jesus Christ is the son of a sun god. God is a sun god, right? Jesus has the same resurrection story and life story as Krishna, Horus. Well, Horus and Osiris is interesting because Horus is the actual sun god, and then Osiris is the son of the sun god who also has the same story as Jesus. Just a few thousand years earlier, though. But you know what? Jesus wouldn't have known that, because it's not like they were ever in Egypt or anything, were they? I don't remember. Maybe not, especially not during his formative years, right? The years that we don't write about in the Bible, because maybe he wasn't in Judea. He was actually in Egypt, not hearing these stories, right? No, that couldn't be the case. No, that's why. No, he could not have copied his father and his sun god from that narrative. No, that's impossible. Couldn't happen. Other gods that is similar to, similar stories. Well, Buddha minus the richness, but Buddha, Hercules, Mithra, Dionysus. But yeah, these Christians, they just can't figure out why we don't take this little book seriously. Look, I have nothing against Christianity. It's a great set of principles to live your life by. But you don't get to include it into reality and act like I'm being ridiculous for not considering this. All right? We all need to have faith. It's part of human. I am totally for having some sort of belief in faith. But don't give me this this silly look because I don't believe in your sun god that was written by illiterate peasants on parchment paper, on papyrus, Okay, I'm sorry. And hemp scrolls. I'm sorry. I just don't. Just doesn't hold the same amount of water to me as, let's say, the writings of, I don't know, Marcus Aurelius. It's the craziness of the 60s, but instead of actually like fighting to end war and to end racial oppression and racism, now we're doubling down on it. Now the words that my Dixiecrat from Southern great-grandparents used inappropriately for decades, they're okay again. Except for the N-word, you can't use that one, right? Unless you're black or can identify as black in some victim way. Then you get a pass. You get the N-word pass. You get your card stamped, right? But colored people, people of color, totally fine, right? I mean, it's crazy. It's, like I said, it's the 60s, but instead of getting rid of it, we're doubling down on this bullshit. I can't understand rap lyrics, which is also the most important part of rap, because they fucking mumble. It's right. Rock is so dead now. Rock and roll, that old guys are the only ones that play it. And then when they're dead in 20 years, dude, there's going to be no one around. I'm going to be the only fucking dinosaur listening to this, dude, from like 90s grunge, man. I'll be the only guy, rocking Weezer, Rage Against the Machine, in my fucking midlife crisis car. Jesus, man. Oh. Right now, right, in this world, this post-COVID world, Big Pharma is good. They're your friends. They had nothing to do with the opium epidemic. That's not them. Crypto is totally different than video game money that like my kids used to play Pokemon Go. It's totally different, I promise. It's actually real, not like the Pokemon Pokecoin. Whoopi Goldberg is now an anti-Semite. Who would have thought? Goldberg is a Semite. George W. Bush is a war hero for the Democrats, and I see him sitting in all these people's private boxes now next to the Obamas, rubbing elbows. It's, riots. Riots are peaceful protests, right? The brick through the store window, that's peaceful. And facts about vaccines, facts about people's health, about their body mass index and their personal habits, that's all misinformation. What the fuck happened? I feel like, and it's not like I crawled under a rock and just haven't been paying attention. I've been watching this progressively get more and more insane. And I don't blame us regular people, us nobodies, for just shutting the fuck up and just having your drink, smoking your weed, and shaking your head and go, Jesus Christ, let's just stay home and avoid this. Let's just turn off CNN. Let's just fucking smoke out, watch Jimmy Dore. Let's just, watch some cool Chinese kung fu action movie. Because, by the way, dude, they do fucking, like, fight movies. Like, we did those fight movies in the 90s. Like Predator and all that, right? Man, the Chinese, they're good at this motherfucking shit. That is some good movie. And look, if you're going to give me an action movie, I don't need a big story. The best kung fu movie, in my opinion, of all time is the Jackie Chan, The Legend of the Drunken Master. His remake when he was a little older, not the original Drunken Master. This one is The Legend of the Drunken Master, where he's got the stepmom who's like, kind of like, she's got some sass. She's got some of that Chinese sass and attitude that you don't see. That's a great movie. That's my favorite movie of all time, right? What's the plot? I could barely tell you. In fact, I had to think about it, but I could sum that thing up in 300 words, no problem. And that's what makes it great. Kung Fu, baby. That's all it is. It's let me get this cool story about this, quote, kid. Jackie Chan's old as fuck in this movie, but no one better to do that role. So, much love to Jackie Chan. When that man dies, that's going to be a international sad fucking day. Rumble in the Bronx, great movie. That guy's great. So anyway, to save your sanity in 2022, check out some Chinese action movies, man. They're good. They're, you know, it's like the old school American movies is what I'm saying is they're not going heavy on the story. What they are going heavy on is the ass kicking, which in these days is nice. Get to sit back, watch some dude, do some sword fighting. And I'm not saying that, if you want to watch gay porn, knock yourself out too. Whatever floats your boat. But you get some nunchucks in there, man. Get some. What I'm saying? I'm from the Ninja Turtles era. I don't mind. I like the nunchucks. I think we need more nunchucks. So that's what I'm gonna run on in 2024. The nobody, John Kellogg. Right? In the entertainment industry, more nunchucks. Less groping and fucking of your assistants and shooting people in the face by the actors, right? Less of all this. Let's do more nunchucks. Let's baby steps. I think that's what I'm going to run on is baby steps. Hollywood, okay, how's about we're going to take the first baby steps, more nunchucks, less complicated plots, right? And then step 2 will be not trying to fuck everybody's mouth. And then step number 3, how about no more pedophilia? You see what I'm saying, guys, here? Every year on the Kellogg platform, the Nobody Kellogg platform, we're going to take it a step up, right? Economically, right? Step 1, right? Explain to me how crypto is different than video game money. Step 2, how's about we buy gold, no more printing more of these dollars and just handing out all this stuff. Step 3, how's about we quit letting big corporate America fucking own everybody. That's why we're putting in blockchain voting so that none of these legislators, none of these people are middlemen to corporate influence anymore. And now the corporations have to kick us back something if we want to vote for their little tax deduction, right? If Amazon wants to get a tax deduction, great. You better give me fucking Prime for free every year for the next 10 years, right? That's what we need to go to, where we have the leverage. But anyway, what the fuck happened? We just need some more nunchucks in our movies. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one. Give me your comments, criticisms in the, comments below there. And have a good one. Stay sunny. And stay sane, everyone. Love you guys. Take care.